should have known better than to go to Meridian that night. The upscale wine bar on 5th Street wasn't exactly my usual scene anymore. Not since the divorce left me questioning everything about my taste in men and venues. But Michelle had insisted, practically dragging me out of my apartment after I'd spent another weekend in pajamas, drowning in work emails and self-pity. "You need to get back out there, Lauren," she'd said, applying my lipstick with the precision of a makeup artist. "You're 33, not 93, and you're gorgeous when you're not hiding behind those oversized sweaters." So there I was, perched on a burgundy leather bar stool, nursing a glass of Pinot Noir, and trying to remember how to make small talk with strangers. The bar hummed with the low murmur of conversations, punctuated by the gentle clink of glasses and soft jazz filtering through hidden speakers. Everything about the place screamed sophistication, from the exposed brick walls adorned with modern art to the bartender, who knew exactly how to garnish a cocktail without being asked. That's when I noticed him. Brandon was sitting 3 stools down, and I caught him looking at me over the rim of his whiskey glass. Not the obvious, predatory stare I'd grown to from men in bars, but something more subtle, appreciative. When our eyes met, he smiled, not the practiced grin of someone working an angle, but something that seemed genuinely warm. He was devastatingly handsome in that mature, distinguished way that comes with age and experience. Salt and pepper hair, perfectly styled, strong jawline, and eyes the color of dark chocolate. Everything about him suggested success, from his crisp white shirt rolled up at the sleeves to the expensive watch catching the ambient light. "Excuse me," he said, sliding over to the empty stool beside me. His voice was deep, confident. "I hope you don't mind me saying, but you look like someone with excellent taste in wine." I laughed despite myself. "Is that your opening line? Because I have to tell you, it's pretty terrible. Terrible enough to work." Brandon's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "I'm Brandon, and I promise my conversation is better than my pickup lines." "Lauren," I extended my hand, surprised by the warmth of his grip. "And you're right, that was awful. But points for honesty. Honesty is important," he said, signaling the bartender for another round, especially after you've been through enough dishonesty to last a lifetime. Something in his tone made me study his face more carefully. There was a weight behind his words, a suggestion of shared experience. "Sounds like you're speaking from personal experience." "Divorced 3 years ago," Brandon said simply. "What about you?" "I'm guessing recent, based on the way you're sitting." "Is it that obvious?" I touched my wedding ring finger unconsciously, still bare after 6 months. But somehow, I kept expecting to find the band there, only to someone who's been there. He leaned closer, and I caught a hint of his cologne, something expensive and understated. "The way you're holding yourself, like you're not quite sure you belong here yet." I recognize it, because I spent months doing the same thing. The bartender placed fresh drinks in front of us, and Brandon raised his glass. "To new beginnings, to figuring out what the hell we're doing," I countered, and we both laughed. As the evening progressed, I found myself genuinely enjoying his company for the first time in months. Brandon was intelligent, asking thoughtful questions about my work as a marketing executive at Hartwell and Associates. When I mentioned the campaign I was developing for a luxury hotel chain, his eyes lit up with genuine interest. "That sounds incredible," he said, leaning forward slightly. "The way you describe the consumer psychology behind brand loyalty, it's fascinating. You must be brilliant at reading people." The compliment sent a warm flush through me. David had never shown interest in my career, dismissing my work as playing with pretty pictures and fancy words. But Brandon hung on every detail, asking follow-up questions that showed he was actually listening. "What about you?" I asked. "What do you do when you're not charming divorced women in wine bars?" "Investment consulting," he said with a slight smile. "Helping people make smart decisions with their money. Though lately, I've been focused on being a single dad. My daughter Emma is 12. She keeps me on my toes." The mention of his daughter softened something in his expression, and I felt another flutter of attraction, a man who was devoted to his child. After David's complete indifference to the idea of starting a family, Brandon's obvious love for his daughter was incredibly appealing. "That must be challenging," I said, "balancing work and parenting on your own." "It is, but she's worth it." His fingers drummed against the bar, and for a moment, something flickered across his face, too quick for me to interpret. "What about kids for you? Is that something you wanted?" The question hit a tender spot. David and I tried for years. He said he wanted a family, but whenever we got close to actually trying seriously, there was always some excuse: his business, the timing, the economy. I took a larger sip of wine than intended. Turns out he was just buying time until he could trade me in for his 25-year-old secretary. "I'm sorry." Brandon's hand covered mine on the bar, warm and reassuring. That must have been devastating. The simple gesture sent electricity up my arm. It had been so long since someone had touched me with genuine comfort, without wanting something in return. The worst part wasn't even the cheating, I heard myself saying. It was realizing how much of my life I'd wasted trying to make someone love me who was never capable of it. "His loss," Brandon said softly, his thumb tracing across my knuckles. "Any man who couldn't see what he had in you is an idiot." The intensity in his voice made me look up, and suddenly the air between us felt charged. His dark eyes held mine, and I felt that familiar flutter of dangerous attraction, the kind that had gotten me into trouble before, but felt impossible to resist. "Tell me about the settlement," he said suddenly, his tone shifting slightly. "I hope you got what you deserved after what he put you through." The question caught me off guard. "The settlement. Sorry, I don't mean to pry." Brandon's smile was apologetic, but something in his expression seemed almost calculating. "It's just, in my line of work, I see too many women get screwed over in divorce proceedings, especially when there's a business involved." "Your ex, what kind of work did he do?" "He owns a chain of automotive dealerships," I said slowly, something nagging at the back of my mind. Mitchell Motors. Why? Brandon's grip on my hand tightened, almost imperceptibly. Just curious. I've heard good things about that company. David Mitchell, right? Smart businessman. A chill ran down my spine. I hadn't mentioned David's last name. How did you? I started. But Brandon was already signaling for the check. I should get going, he said smoothly. Early meeting tomorrow. But I'd love to see you again, Lauren. Would you give me your number, despite the strange moment? Despite the voice in my head telling me to slow down. I found myself entering my contact information into his phone. The attraction was too strong. The promise of feeling desired again, too tempting to resist. As I watched him walk away, his confident stride carrying him into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a terrible mistake. But when my phone buzzed an hour later with a text from Brandon, can't stop thinking about tonight. When can I see you again? All my doubts melted away. I was already falling, and I didn't even know how far I had to go. The next 3 weeks felt like a whirlwind romance, straight out of a movie. The kind I used to watch and roll my eyes at, thinking no one actually lived like that. Brandon didn't just text, he called. Every night at exactly 9:30 p.m., his deep voice would fill my apartment through the phone, making me curl up on my couch like a teenager with her first crush. Tell me about your day, he'd say. And somehow, I'd find myself talking for hours about the most mundane things. My difficult client, who wanted to change her entire kitchen design for the 3rd time. The way the barista at my usual coffee shop always spelled my name wrong. The book I was reading. He was an incredible listener. He remembered details I'd forgotten I'd mentioned. When I complained about my lower back aching from hunching over design sketches, a massage therapist showed up at my office the next day. Compliments of a friend, she said, with a knowing smile. The flowers started arriving on Tuesday of the 2nd week. Not generic roses, but exotic orchids in shades of deep purple that matched my favorite dress, the one I'd worn to our first dinner. How had he remembered that? Brandon, this is too much, I protested when he called that evening. Nothing's too much for you, he said, his voice dropping to that low register that made my stomach flutter. Besides, I like spoiling you. It's been a long time since I've had someone worth spoiling. That mysterious edge to his words should have concerned me, but instead it thrilled me. There was a story there, layers to uncover. I found myself wondering about his past, about what had made him single, about the shadows that sometimes crossed his face when he thought I wasn't looking. When Michelle invited me out for drinks on Friday, I almost said yes, almost. But Brandon had asked me to dinner at Castellano's, the most exclusive restaurant in town, the kind of place where reservations were booked months in advance. Rain check. I texted Michelle, feeling guilty about the lie. Work emergency. The truth was, I wasn't ready to explain Brandon to my friends yet. The 12-year age gap felt significant when I imagined saying it out loud. And there was something else, something I couldn't quite name. The way he always paid in cash, crisp hundreds pulled from a money clip. The way his phone was always face down on the table, and how he'd excuse himself to take calls, walking just far enough away that I couldn't hear. "You're being secretive," he'd tease when I'd try to listen in, but his smile never quite reached his eyes. At Castellano's, he ordered wine that cost more than my monthly car payment. The waiter treated him like royalty, addressing him as Mr. Hayes with obvious deference. I wondered how often he came here, and with whom. "You're quiet tonight," Brandon observed, reaching across the white tablecloth to touch my hand. His fingers were warm, calloused, in a way that suggested he worked with his hands, despite his expensive suits. "Just thinking," I said, trying to shake off the strange mood that had settled over me. "About." I took a sip of wine, gathering courage. "About you, about us. I realize I don't know very much about your life." Something flickered across his face, so quickly I almost missed it. "What would you like to know?" "Everything," I said honestly. "Your work, your family, what made you who you are." He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before. "I wasn't always successful, Lauren. There was a time when I trusted the wrong people, when I believed that loyalty and friendship meant something. I learned the hard way that some people will smile to your face while they're destroying everything you've built." His grip on my hand tightened, his thumb tracing circles on my skin that sent shivers up my arm. "But that's in the past. What matters now is this, you and me, right here." The intensity in his dark eyes made my breath catch. There was pain there, old wounds that hadn't quite healed. I wanted to ask more, to understand what had hurt him so deeply, but something in his expression warned me not to push. After dinner, he walked me to my car in the restaurant's dimly lit parking lot. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of burning leaves and the promise of winter. I was fumbling with my keys when he caught my wrist, turning me to face him. "Lauren," he said softly, and then his mouth was on mine. The kiss was nothing like the gentle, tentative first kisses I remembered from my past. This was hungry, consuming, full of weeks of built-up tension and unspoken desire. His hands tangled in my hair, pulling me closer until there was no space between us. I could taste the wine on his lips, smell his cologne mixed with something distinctly male and intoxicating. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless, my heart hammering against my ribs. "God, Lauren," he whispered against my forehead. "You have no idea what you do to me. I should have gone home then, should have said goodnight, and driven away to think clearly about what was happening between us. Instead, I heard myself saying, 'Your place or mine.'" He smiled, the first genuinely happy expression I'd seen from him all evening. "Mine. There's someone I'd like you to meet." That surprised me. At this hour, my daughter Emma, she's 8, and she's staying with me this week. His voice softened when he mentioned her, revealing a tenderness that made my chest tight. "She'll be asleep," but I thought, "Maybe you'd like to see where I live. Get to know me better, like you said." The fact that he had a child shouldn't have shocked me. He'd mentioned being divorced, after all, but somehow I'd pictured him living alone in some sleek bachelor pad, not as a father tucking his daughter into bed each night. "She lives with you full time?" I asked as I followed his car through winding suburban streets when we parked in his driveway. He explained while we walked to his front door. "Her mother isn't in the picture. It's been just Emma and me. 3 years. His house was beautiful, a sprawling colonial with warm light spilling from the windows. But as he unlocked the front door, paying cash for everything suddenly made more sense. This wasn't a man living paycheck to paycheck. What exactly do you do?" I asked as he hung my coat in the foyer. Again, that hesitation, that careful choosing of words. "I'm in acquisitions," he said finally. "I help people recover what's rightfully theirs." Before I could ask what that meant, a small voice called from upstairs. "Daddy, is that you?" "Coming, sweetheart," Brandon called back, his entire demeanor shifting. "Wait here," he told me softly. "I'll just tuck her back in," as I stood alone in his living room, surrounded by family photos and children's artwork held to the refrigerator with magnets. I realized how little I actually knew about the man I was falling for. Have you ever been in a complicated situation like this? Tell me in the comments. But when Brandon returned, his hair mussed from his daughter's goodnight hug, smiling at me like I was the answer to prayers he'd been too afraid to voice. All my questions seemed less important than the way he was looking at me. "She's beautiful," I said, gesturing to a photo of a dark-haired little girl with his same intense eyes. "She is. She's everything to me." He moved closer, his hand finding the small of my back. "And now, so are you." But the words should have terrified me. We'd known each other less than a month. But standing there in his warm, lived-in home, seeing this softer side of him, I felt myself falling deeper into whatever this was between us. I just had no idea how far I still had left to fall. The next few weeks blurred together in a haze of stolen kisses and whispered promises. Brandon would text me at all hours, sending photos of Emma's artwork or the sunset from his office window. Each message felt like a small gift, a glimpse into the life he was building around me. But it was at work that things started getting weird. "Lauren, can I see you for a minute?" Michelle cornered me by the coffee machine, her expression oddly serious. "What's up?" I tried to keep my voice casual, but something in her tone made my stomach tighten. "A friend of mine saw your photo on some guy's Instagram. She recognized you from when we went to that charity gala last year." Michelle's eyes searched my face. "Since when are you dating someone? You haven't mentioned anyone." My blood went cold. What photo? What Instagram? Some older guy, really good looking. The photo was of you two at dinner, but it looked, I don't know, professional. Like someone was taking pictures from across the restaurant. She pulled out her phone. I tried to find it again, but the account's gone private now. I forced a laugh that sounded hollow, even to me. Must be a case of mistaken identity. You know how these social media things are. But Michelle wasn't buying it. Lauren, the woman in the photo, was wearing That blue dress you wore to work last Thursday. The one you said you were going straight home in because you were tired. Caught. The word hung between us like a blade. It's complicated, I said finally. Complicated how? Are you seeing someone or not? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Brandon's name lit up the screen, and despite everything, my heart did that stupid flutter it always did. Need to see you tonight. Something important we need to discuss. I have to go, I told Michelle, grabbing my coffee and practically fleeing to my office. That evening, Brandon was waiting in his car outside my apartment building. The moment I slid into the passenger seat, I could feel the tension radiating from him. We have a problem, he said without preamble. What kind of problem? His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. Michelle, Emma's mother. She's trying to change our custody arrangement. Claims I'm not providing a stable environment for Emma. The way he said, Michelle, made something twist in my stomach. What does that have to do with me? She's hired a private investigator. They're watching me, taking photos. He turned to face me, his eyes intense in the dim light. They probably got pictures of us together. Suddenly, Michelle's friend's Instagram sighting made terrible sense. So that photo my colleague saw was probably taken by Michelle's pie. Brandon reached over and took my hand. I'm sorry you got dragged into this, Lauren, but I need you to know. I'm not going to let her take Emma away from me. The fierce protectiveness in his voice should have been reassuring. Instead, it sent a chill down my spine. What do you need me to do? Just be patient with me while I handle this. And maybe, he hesitated. There are a few events coming up, places where your ex-husband might be. If you were seen there, looking happy, moving on with your life, it might. I stared at him. You want me to go to events where David will be. I want to support you in showing the world that you've moved past him, that you're thriving. His thumb stroked across my knuckles, and if it happens to demonstrate to Michelle that I can provide Emma with a stable, loving home environment, well, the manipulation was so smooth, so reasonable sounding, that I almost missed it entirely. Brandon, I don't understand. Why would my presence at social events help your custody case? Because it shows I'm in a committed relationship with a successful, stable woman. Someone who could be a positive influence in Emma's life. His smile was warm, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. You want to meet her properly, don't you? Maybe help me show Michelle that Emma would be better off with us. Us. The word hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I wasn't ready for. Over the following days, the lies multiplied like cancer cells. I told my boss I had food poisoning when Brandon needed me to attend a gallery opening where David's law firm was sponsoring. I told my sister I was working late when I was actually at Brandon's house, helping Emma with her math homework while he made phone calls in the next room. Lauren seems nice, Daddy, Emma said one evening as I helped her clean up her art supplies. She is, sweetheart. Very nice. Brandon appeared in the doorway, watching us with satisfaction. How would you feel if Lauren spent more time here? Emma's face lit up, like sleepovers. Maybe, He caught my eye over her head. We'll see. But it was the phone call I overheard that changed everything. I'd gone to the kitchen for water while Emma was showing me her latest drawing. Brandon was on the back porch, his voice carrying through the sliding door he'd thought was closed. Exactly what I told you would happen. She's completely hooked. A pause. No, she has no idea. Thinks this is all about custody and Emma. Another pause, then a laugh that made my skin crawl. Trust me, by the time David realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. My hand froze on the water glass. The Meridian account access was just the beginning. Once I have everything I need from her, Michelle gets her money, and Emma gets the stability she deserves. His voice dropped lower. What? No, Lauren won't be a problem. Women like her, they fall so hard they can't see straight. She'll do whatever I ask. The glass slipped from my numb fingers, shattering against the kitchen tiles. Lauren, Emma called from the living room. Are you okay? Fine, I managed, my voice cracking. Just clumsy. Brandon's conversation stopped abruptly. Footsteps on the porch. I grabbed paper towels with shaking hands, mind racing. Meridian account access. What did that mean? And who was he talking to about Michelle getting money? By the time Brandon came inside, I had the glass cleaned up and my game face on. Everything all right? He asked, those intense eyes searching my face. Just tired, I said. Maybe I should head home. Of course. He moved closer, his hand finding my waist. You've been working so hard lately, taking care of me and Emma. But the touch that used to send electricity through me now felt like ice. Driving home, my mind churned with fragments of overheard conversation and mounting evidence. The mysterious job, the cash payments, the way he'd known David's name before I'd told him, the private investigator photos, and now this, something about accounts and money, and using me for information I didn't even know I was providing. If you're hooked on this story, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Because that night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I realized I wasn't falling in love with Brandon at all. I was falling into a trap that had been carefully constructed around me from the very first moment we'd met. And I had no idea how deep it went, or if I could find my way out before it was too late. The next morning, I woke up with that sick feeling still churning in my stomach. Coffee didn't help. Neither did the shower or the mindless scroll through work emails. I kept hearing fragments of Brandon's phone conversation. Meridian account access. She has no idea. Michelle gets her money. What money? What access? And why did the mention of Michelle, his supposedly absent ex-wife, make my skin crawl? By noon, I couldn't concentrate on anything. I decided to drive to Brandon's house. Emma would be at school, and maybe I could get some answers without a curious 8-year-old listening in. I found Brandon in his home office, laptop open, phone beside him on the mahogany desk. He looked up when I knocked, that devastating smile spreading across his face. Lauren, what a wonderful surprise. He stood, moving toward me with that predatory grace that used to make me weak in the knees. I thought you were swamped with work today. I wanted to see you, I said, letting him pull me into his arms. His cologne, that expensive woodsy scent, wrapped around me. But instead of comfort, it felt suffocating. His phone buzzed against the desk. We both glanced toward it. The screen lit up, and for just a moment, I could see the preview of a text message. The plan is working perfectly. She has no idea about. Brandon moved quickly, grabbing the phone and flipping it face down. But not quickly enough. Who's texting you? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Just work stuff. His jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. Boring acquisition details. Acquisition. That word again. The same word he'd used to describe his mysterious job. What kind of acquisition? I pressed. You never really explained what you do. But Brandon's hands found my waist, pulling me closer. Nothing that would interest you, beautiful. Just helping people recover assets that rightfully belong to them. The same rehearsed line, word for word. His phone buzzed again. This time, he ignored it completely. But I could see the tension in his shoulders. The way his fingers pressed just a little too hard against my hip bones. I should let you get back to work, I said, stepping away. I just wanted to drop by and say hi. Stay for lunch, he insisted. I'll cook for you. That pasta you love. I can't. Meeting with a client in an hour. Lie, but I needed space to think. Driving away from his house, my mind raced. The plan is working. She has no idea. What plan? And who was she? Was I the she they were discussing? Or was it Michelle? That evening, I did something I'd never done before in any relationship. I stalked Brandon's social media. His Instagram was mostly private, but the public posts were revealing enough. Photos from the wine bar where we'd met. Pictures of expensive dinners at restaurants I recognized. Places we'd been together, but the captions made my blood run cold. New beginnings after toxic relationships. Sometimes the best revenge is living well, moving forward. Some people deserve to see what they lost. Good things come to those who wait and plan, but it was the comments that made everything click into place. At Michelle, our lifestyle had commented on nearly every post. Recent comments, active engagement. So proud of you, babe. She looks exactly like you described. Can't wait to see her face when she finds out. My hands shook as I clicked on Michelle's profile. Public. Hundreds of photos. Michelle wasn't Brandon's absent ex-wife. She was gorgeous, blonde, clearly still very much in his life. Recent photos showed her in what looked like Brandon's house. I recognized the kitchen island, the leather couch, even some of Emma's artwork on the refrigerator behind her. But more damning were the photos of Brandon and Michelle together. Recent photos. Date stamps from just weeks ago, right around the time he'd been pursuing me so intensely. There was Brandon at a charity gala with Michelle on his arm. Brandon and Michelle at a restaurant I recognized. The same Italian place where he'd taken me for our third date. Brandon kissing Michelle's cheek at what looked like a family barbecue. The timeline made me sick. I scrolled back through Brandon's posts, cross-referencing with the dates I'd been seeing him. The pattern became clear. Every time Brandon posted about his new beginning with me, Michelle would comment. And then, within days, there would be photos of them together on her account. This wasn't about Brandon moving on from his ex-wife. This was about Brandon using me to make Michelle jealous. Or worse, using me as part of some elaborate game they were playing together. I thought about all the places Brandon had taken me, the wine bar where we'd met. Michelle had posted a photo from the same bar just hours after our first date, with the caption, "Watching the show." The farmer's market where we'd had that romantic morning. Michelle had been there too, according to her geotagged posts. Even the restaurant where Brandon had first kissed me. Michelle had photos from the parking lot that same evening. She'd been watching us, following us. With Brandon's knowledge, maybe even his encouragement. My phone rang, Brandon's name on the screen. "Hey, beautiful," his voice smooth as whiskey. "I was thinking about you. Want to grab dinner tomorrow? There's this new place I want to try." I looked at Michelle's latest Instagram story, a photo of a restaurant menu with the location tagged. The same restaurant Brandon was suggesting. "Actually," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "I think I'm coming down with something. Maybe we should postpone." "Of course. Want me to bring you soup? Take care of you." The offer that would have melted me a week ago now felt like manipulation. How many times had he played the caring boyfriend role while Michelle watched from the sidelines? "I'll be fine," I said. "I just need rest." "I love you, Lauren." The words hit like ice water. He'd never said that before. Why now? What had changed? Unless this was part of the plan too. Unless Michelle was listening. Unless this whole conversation was performance art designed to provoke some reaction from his very much present wife. "I'll call you tomorrow," I said, and hung up. I stared at my phone, at Michelle's smiling face in her profile picture, at Brandon's carefully curated posts about new beginnings and moving forward. I wasn't Brandon's new girlfriend. I was a prop in whatever twisted game he and Michelle were playing. A way to add drama to their relationship, to make Michelle chase him, to prove some point about desire and possession. But what did that have to do with Meridian account access? What information did I have that they wanted? And how long had they been planning this? How far back did this elaborate deception go? I thought about that first night at the wine bar. How Brandon had seemed to appear out of nowhere, just when I needed rescuing from an awkward conversation. How perfectly he'd swooped in. How exactly he'd been what I was looking for. Nothing about our meeting had been coincidence. Everything had been orchestrated. And I was just beginning to understand how deep this rabbit hole went. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Michelle's face in those Instagram photos, her knowing smile as she watched Brandon's performance unfold. By 6 a.m., I was dressed and driving to Brandon's house. The screenshots were burning a hole in my phone, evidence of the elaborate charade I'd been trapped in for weeks. His BMW was in the driveway when I pulled up. Through the front window, I could see him in the kitchen, still in his silk pajamas, making coffee. So domestic, so perfectly normal, except nothing about this was normal. I didn't knock. I used the spare key he'd given me last week. Another calculated gesture to make me feel special, chosen. The coffee maker hissed as I stepped into his kitchen. Lauren. Brandon turned, surprise flickering across his face. What are you doing here so early? We need to talk. I pulled out my phone, fingers trembling slightly as I scrolled to the screenshots. About Michelle, his entire body went rigid. The coffee mug slipped from his hand, shattering against the marble countertop. Dark liquid splashed across his white pajamas. I don't know what you think you don't. I held up my phone, showing him Michelle's comment from Hope your new friend enjoyed the orchids. Same florist as always. Face blowing a kiss. She's been watching everything, Brandon. Commenting on your posts about me, following our entire relationship like it's her personal entertainment. Brandon's face drained of color. He reached for paper towels, hands shaking as he dabbed at the spilled coffee. You don't understand the situation, he said quietly. Then explain it. I swiped to another screenshot. Explain why your supposedly absent ex-wife knows about every date we've been on. Explain why she's liking photos of us together. Explain what the hell a Meridian account has to do with any of this. Brandon stopped cleaning. He gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white. Michelle didn't abandon us, he said finally. She left me 3 months ago because she said I was controlling, manipulative. The words hung in the air between us. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. We're in a custody battle, he continued, not meeting my eyes. A brutal one. She wants primary custody of Emma. She's claiming I'm unfit, that I can't maintain stable relationships, that I use people. Use people, the phrase echoed in my head. Like you used me. But Lauren, please, you targeted me. The pieces were falling into place now, each revelation more sickening than the last. A successful woman, recently divorced, perfect for proving you'd reformed, and could provide a stable home environment. But Brandon finally looked at me. His eyes were red-rimmed, desperate. The custody hearing is next week. My lawyer said having a serious relationship would help my case. Show the judge I'd moved on, that I could build something healthy. So you built something fake instead. I felt bile rise in my throat. Every dinner, every kiss, every time you said you cared about me, it was all evidence for your custody case. It wasn't fake, he said, stepping toward me. What I feel for you is real, Lauren. The connection between us. Stop. I backed away from him. Just stop lying. You researched me, didn't you? You knew about my divorce, my job, probably my address before you ever walked into that wine bar. But Brandon's silence was answer enough. That night at Meridian wasn't coincidence, I continued. You planned it. You knew I'd be there. I followed your social media, he admitted, voice barely a whisper. I saw you checked in at the bar. I thought if I could just meet you naturally. Naturally, I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You orchestrated our entire relationship to manipulate a family court judge. And Michelle figured it out, he said. She's been watching, documenting everything. She thinks it proves her point about me being manipulative, because you are manipulative. The words exploded out of me. You used me as a prop in your custody battle. You made me believe you cared about me, when really I was just evidence. Brandon ran his hands through his hair, leaving it disheveled. He looked older suddenly, the careful polish stripped away. I do care about you, he said. That's the problem. This was supposed to be simple. A few months of dating to show the court I'd moved on. But then I started falling for you, and Michelle could see it. And now she's using our relationship against me anyway. Our relationship. I stared at him in disbelief. We don't have a relationship, Brandon. We never did. You created an elaborate fiction and cast me as the leading lady without telling me it was all pretend. I thought about all the romantic gestures, the expensive dinners, the thoughtful gifts, the way he'd listened to me talk about my dreams. Every moment had been calculated to create the perfect narrative for his custody case. The passion was real, he said desperately. When I kissed you, when we held each other, that wasn't performance, Lauren. I swear to you, but how could I believe anything he said now? How could I trust that any feeling between us was genuine when our entire foundation was built on lies? What about the Meridian account access? I asked. What does that have to do with anything? Brandon's face went pale again. Michelle works in banking. She thought maybe through you, we could access some information that might help with our financial settlement. Your connections, your client network, the full scope of their scheme hit me like a physical blow. Not only had Brandon used me as relationship theater for his custody case, but both he and Michelle had planned to exploit my professional connections for their divorce proceedings. Ladies, if this is making your heart race, show me some love with a like, I whispered to myself, thinking about how many women had probably lived through similar betrayals. I looked at Brandon, really looked at him. The expensive watch, the silk pajamas, the perfectly appointed kitchen. All of it designed to project success, stability, worthiness. But underneath was just a man so desperate to win that he'd sacrifice anyone who got in his way. I trusted you, I said quietly. I opened my heart to you. I introduced you to my friends, let you into my life, believed your stories about being a devoted father trying to do right by his daughter. I am trying to do right by Emma, he said. She needs me, Lauren. Michelle will destroy her with her chaos, her instability. I'm fighting for my daughter by destroying me. I shook my head. You don't get to use people as weapons in your war, Brandon. You don't get to manipulate someone's feelings and call it love. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. What are you going to do? He asked. I looked back at him one final time. This man who had seemed so perfect So exactly what I needed. This man who had kissed me like he meant it, while planning to exploit my professional connections and use our relationship as evidence in his custody battle. I'm going to get my life back, I said. The real one. The one where people don't lie to me about who they are and what they want. But as I walked toward the door, I realized the hardest part wasn't just that Brandon had used me. It was that somewhere in all those lies, I'd started to believe I could trust someone again. And now I had to figure out how to rebuild that trust, this time starting with myself. The drive home felt endless, each red light a reminder of how thoroughly I'd been played. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, the memory of Brandon's confession echoing in my mind. Everything, every dinner, every kiss, every supposedly spontaneous moment had been calculated, orchestrated, designed to make me fall for a lie. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the dark car for several minutes, staring at my own front door. Even my house felt different now, tainted by the knowledge that Brandon had studied my life, my routines, my vulnerabilities. He'd known exactly where to find me, exactly how to approach me, exactly what I needed to hear. Inside, I poured myself a glass of wine with trembling hands and stared at my phone. 23 missed calls from Brandon, 47 text messages that I deleted without reading. I blocked his number, then blocked him on every social media platform I could think of. But the damage was already done. The next morning brought the first wave of consequences. My assistant, Michelle, knocked on my office door, her expression carefully neutral. "Lauren, HR wants to see you," she said quietly. "There are some concerns about recent social media activity." My stomach dropped. The charity gala photos, the restaurant pictures, all those carefully staged moments where Brandon had made sure we were photographed together, building his case for custody court, while simultaneously exposing my private life to professional scrutiny. The HR meeting was a nightmare of carefully worded questions about professional boundaries and representing the company appropriately. They showed me printouts of Instagram posts, Brandon and me at the wine bar where we'd met, at the upscale restaurants, at events where my presence suggested I had influence he could leverage. "We're not saying you've done anything wrong," the HR director explained, her tone suggesting otherwise. But the Meridian account has raised some questions about potential conflicts of interest. Meridian, the account Brandon had mentioned in that overheard phone call. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. He hadn't just been using me for custody evidence. He'd been positioning himself to exploit my professional connections all along. "I had no knowledge of any conflict," I said carefully. "The relationship is over. We understand," she replied. "But we'll need to review your recent client interactions to ensure proper protocols were followed." I walked back to my office feeling like everyone was staring at me. Maybe they were. Maybe Brandon's careful documentation of our relationship had made me the subject of office gossip without me even realizing it. The second wave hit that evening when Sarah called. "Lauren, what the hell is going on?" Her voice was sharp with hurt. "I just saw your Instagram. You've been seeing someone for weeks and didn't tell us. After everything with David, we thought you'd trust us enough to." "It's complicated," I interrupted. "Complicated how?" "He looks like he's been in your life for a while. Those photos at Meridian, at Il Giardino, those are our places, Lauren. Places we go together. And you brought some random guy there without saying a word." I closed my eyes. Sarah was right to feel betrayed. I'd lied to my closest friends, hidden this relationship, because some part of me had known it was too good to be true. But instead of trusting my instincts or confiding in people who cared about me, I'd let Brandon isolate me with his intensity and his secrets. "The relationship is over," I said. "And you're right. I should have told you. I should have trusted you. What happened?" Sarah's anger softened into concern. "Lauren, you sound awful." But I couldn't explain. Not yet. The humiliation was too fresh. The manipulation too complex. How could I tell my friends that I'd been so desperate for connection, that I'd fallen for an elaborate lie? The third wave came the next day in the form of a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi, this is Michelle. I think we need to talk about Brandon. Please call me back." Michelle, the woman from the photos, the one I'd thought was Brandon's absent ex-wife. My finger hovered over the delete button, but something in her voice stopped me. She sounded tired, sad, not vindictive or cruel, just exhausted. I called her back. "Thank you for calling," she said immediately. "I've been trying to reach you for days, but Brandon blocked my number on your phone." "What? He has access to your accounts somehow. I tried commenting on your posts, tried messaging you directly. Everything got deleted before you could see it." A chill ran down my spine. How deep did his manipulation go? "Can we meet?" Michelle asked. "There are things you need to know. Things about Brandon, about what he's capable of." We met at a small coffee shop across town, somewhere Brandon wouldn't think to look for us. Michelle arrived first, and I recognized her immediately from the Instagram photos, but she looked different in person. Older, more worn down. Her eyes held the same wariness I'd been feeling since that night in Brandon's kitchen. "I'm sorry," she said as I sat down, "for what he did to you, for what I let him do." "Let him do." Michelle wrapped her hands around her coffee mug like she was trying to warm herself. "Brandon doesn't just manipulate one person at a time. He creates entire scenarios, involves multiple people, makes everyone think they're getting what they want while he pulls the strings." She told me the truth then, how she'd never abandoned Emma, never been the unstable ex-wife Brandon had portrayed, how she'd left him because of his controlling behavior, his need to orchestrate every aspect of their lives, how he'd fought the custody arrangement, not because he wanted to protect Emma, but because he couldn't stand losing control. "He's done this before," Michelle said quietly. found women who could help his case, women with influence or connections. Right image. He studies them, figures out what they need to hear, becomes exactly that person. How many women? You're the fourth that I know of. Her voice was barely above a whisper. The others figured it out before it went too far, or they served their purpose and he discarded them. But you were different. You had everything he needed: professional success, social connections, and you were vulnerable enough to believe his story. I felt sick. The custody case. He's been documenting everything. Every date, every photo, every moment that makes him look like a stable, committed partner ready for a serious relationship. He'll present it all as evidence that he's changed, that he's ready to provide Emma with a stable home environment. The cruelest part was that I genuinely cared about Emma, had started imagining a future where I could be part of her life. Brandon had used even that, my capacity for love, my desire to nurture, as a weapon in his war. What can I do? I asked. Michelle looked at me with something like hope for the first time since we'd sat down. Tell the truth in court if it comes to that. Help me show the judge who Brandon really is, what he's willing to do to win. I nodded, feeling something shift inside me. The devastation was still there, the humiliation and betrayal, but underneath it, something else was growing. Not quite strength yet, but the foundation for it. Brandon had tried to make me a weapon in his war against Michelle. Instead, he'd given me the power to fight back, and this time, I'd be fighting for the truth. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Not because I was physically ill, though my stomach felt like I'd swallowed broken glass, but because I couldn't face pretending everything was normal. I sat at my kitchen table with cold coffee and Michelle's business card, turning it over and over in my fingers. She'd given it to me before we parted ways at the cafe, her expression serious. Think about what I said, Lauren. Emma deserves better than this. Emma, the little girl with the bright smile in Brandon's carefully curated photos. The child who'd become real to me through his stories, who I'd started imagining reading bedtime stories to, helping with homework, teaching to paint watercolors on Sunday afternoons. None of it had been real, but Emma was. I spent the day researching custody cases, reading about parental alienation and manipulation tactics. The more I learned, the sicker I felt. Brandon wasn't just a man trying to win back his daughter. He was a predator who saw people as tools to achieve his goals. By evening, I'd made a list. Pros and cons of getting involved versus walking away. The cons column was longer. Public humiliation, reliving the betrayal in court, potential professional consequences, emotional trauma. The pros column had exactly one item: protecting Emma. But sometimes one reason is enough. I called my therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, and scheduled an emergency session for the next day. I needed to talk this through with someone objective, someone who could help me separate my desire for revenge from genuine concern for a child's welfare. You're processing a significant trauma, Dr. Chen said the following afternoon, her voice gentle but direct. It's natural to want some form of justice, but you need to be honest with yourself about your motivations. I shifted in the familiar leather chair, pulling my cardigan tighter around myself. I keep thinking about Emma. What if Brandon does this again? What if he teaches her that this is how relationships work? That people are just chess pieces to be moved around? And what if testifying re-traumatizes you? What if it doesn't change the outcome? Those were the questions that kept me awake at night. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, alternating between righteous anger and paralyzing fear. Brandon had already stolen weeks of my life, made me doubt my judgment, damaged my professional reputation. Was I ready to give him more power over me? But then I'd remember Michelle's face when she talked about Emma. The way her voice broke when she described watching her daughter being used as a pawn. 3 days after my conversation with Michelle, I was still undecided when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hi Lauren, this is Michelle. I wanted you to know that Brandon's lawyer filed new motions today. The custody hearing is scheduled for next month. No pressure, but the offer to testify stands if you're willing. I stared at the message for a long time. Next month. 4 weeks to decide whether I was brave enough to face Brandon in court, to tell a room full of strangers how thoroughly I'd been manipulated. I called my best friend Sarah, not Dr. Chen, but Sarah Martinez from college, the one person who'd known me long enough to tell me hard truths. You've been different since you started dating him, she said, after I'd given her the abbreviated version of events. More secretive, less you. We all noticed. That stung, but it was true. Brandon's manipulation had been so subtle, so gradual, that I hadn't even realized I was changing. Declining girls' nights to wait for his calls, making excuses when friends asked too many questions about him, isolating myself without even knowing it. But here's the thing, Sarah continued. You're not just a victim in this. You have agency. You can choose what happens next. Agency. The word stuck with me. That weekend, I drove to the park where Michelle had said she sometimes took Emma. I didn't expect to see them. It felt too much like stalking. But I needed to be in a space where children played, where innocence still existed. I sat on a bench watching kids on the playground, their laughter cutting through the autumn air. A little girl with dark hair was teaching a younger boy how to go down the slide safely. Her patience and kindness, so pure it made my chest ache. Emma was somewhere in this city, caught between 2 adults who claimed to love her, but were using her as ammunition in their war. What kind of person would I be if I walked away knowing I could help? That night, I made my decision. I texted Michelle, I'll testify. What do I need to do? Her response came within minutes. Thank you. I'll have my lawyer contact you tomorrow. What you're doing. It matters more than you know. I spent the next week preparing. Michelle's lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Valdez, walked me through what to expect. The questions Brandon's lawyer would ask, designed to make me look vindictive or unstable. The importance of sticking to facts, not emotions. He'll try to discredit you, Patricia warned during our prep session. He'll suggest you're a scorned woman seeking revenge. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Brandon's hands on my face, the way he'd looked at me like I was the most important person in his world. All of it calculated, all of it fake. I'm prepared, I said, but preparation couldn't fully shield me from the reality of what I was choosing. I was about to stand up in court and admit that I'd been completely fooled by a man I thought I was falling in love with. I was going to detail every manipulation, every lie, every moment when I should have seen through his act, but didn't. The night before I was scheduled to give my deposition, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Emma, about Michelle, about all the women Brandon might target in the future if someone didn't stop him. I also thought about myself, not just as a victim, but as someone with the power to speak truth. Brandon had tried to make me a weapon in his war, but I was choosing to be something else entirely. I was choosing to be a witness. Sitting at my kitchen table at 3 a.m., still in my pajamas, with cold tea growing bitter in my mug, I realized something had shifted. The devastation was still there. The humiliation still burned. But underneath it all, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Pride. Pride that I'd figured out the truth. Pride that I'd connected with Michelle instead of seeing her as an enemy. Pride that I was choosing to protect a child I'd never met over protecting my own comfort. Brandon had underestimated me. He'd seen someone vulnerable, someone easily manipulated. He hadn't counted on the strength that comes from having your eyes fully opened, from choosing to fight back not for revenge, but for what's right. Tomorrow, I would walk into that lawyer's office and tell my story. All of it. The attraction, the manipulation, the devastating realization that none of it had been real. I would let Patricia record every word, knowing it might be played in court, knowing Brandon would hear it all. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt ready. Comment below. Am I the hero or the villain here? 6 months later, I stood in the courthouse hallway watching Michelle emerge from the family courtroom with tears streaming down her face. But these weren't tears of defeat. They were tears of relief. Shared custody, she whispered, pulling me into a hug that surprised us both. Primary placement with me. Emma gets to come home. The judge had been thorough. Patricia told us later, over coffee, my testimony about Brandon's calculated manipulation had been crucial evidence of his character patterns. The way he'd targeted me specifically, the elaborate deception involving multiple women, the cold planning behind what I'd believed was spontaneous attraction. It all painted a picture of someone who saw people as chess pieces rather than human beings. Brandon would get Emma every other weekend and one evening per week. Supervised visits for the first month, given what the court called concerning patterns of manipulation and deception in personal relationships. I'd expected to feel vindicated. Instead, I felt something quieter, peace. "I never thanked you properly," Michelle said, as we sat in the coffee shop across from the courthouse. Emma was coloring at the next table, her tongue poking out in concentration, as she worked on a drawing of a house with 3 stick figures in front. "You don't need to thank me for telling the truth, not just that." Michelle stirred her latte slowly. "For seeing me as a person instead of an enemy. Brandon counted on us hating each other. He never expected us to compare notes." I watched Emma add a dog to her drawing, a small brown creature with a wagging tail. "She's resilient. Kids are. But this transition is going to be hard. New house, new school, adjusting to having her mom back full time." Michelle paused. "I'm going to need help. Over the following weeks, I found myself becoming an unexpected part of their lives. Not because of manipulation or schemes, but because Michelle genuinely needed support. And I found purpose in providing it. I helped Emma set up her new bedroom, hanging fairy lights and organizing her art supplies in rainbow order. I taught her how to make chocolate chip cookies when she missed her dad's house. I listened when she cried about feeling confused, about loving both parents, but not understanding why they couldn't all live together. "Lauren, why did Daddy lie?" she asked me one afternoon while we waited for Michelle to finish a parent-teacher conference. "Sometimes adults make bad choices when they're scared," I said carefully. "Your daddy was scared of losing you, so he made some choices that hurt people. But that doesn't mean he doesn't love you." She nodded solemnly, then returned to her coloring book. The simplicity of children. They could hold complex truths without needing them to make perfect sense. 3 months after the custody decision, Michelle started dating again. She was nervous, almost apologetic when she told me. "His name is David," she said over wine at my apartment. "He's a teacher at Emma's school. Nothing dramatic or intense, just kind, normal." I'd forgotten what normal felt like. "That's wonderful. Is it weird that I'm asking my ex-husband's former, whatever you were, for dating advice?" I laughed. "Everything about this situation is weird, but weird doesn't mean wrong." When Michelle introduced David to Emma, she asked me to be there, not as a buffer, but as someone Emma trusted, someone who could help her navigate another change. David was indeed kind, patient when Emma showed him her entire rock collection, genuinely interested in her stories about school, careful not to overstep boundaries. He brought her a small succulent in a painted pot, something she could take care of herself. "It's like you," he told her. "Strong and beautiful, but it needs gentle care to grow." Emma beamed, and I saw Michelle relax for the first time in months. As weeks turned into months, I watched this new family configuration take shape. David would join us for Emma's soccer games, cheering from the sidelines with the same enthusiasm as any biological parent. Michelle would text me photos of the three of them at the zoo, at the farmer's market, building a snowman in their backyard. I became something I'd never expected, an honorary aunt, someone Emma could call when she needed help with homework and her mom was working late. Someone who remembered her favorite pizza toppings and knew she was afraid of butterflies but loved caterpillars. "You know what's funny?" Michelle said one evening as we watched Emma and David build a blanket fort in her living room. "I spent so long trying to create the perfect family with Brandon. Everything had to look right, feel right, fit his vision of what we should be. And now I have this messy, unconventional thing where my daughter's honorary aunt is someone my ex-husband manipulated. And we're all somehow making it work." She sipped her wine thoughtfully. "It's not what I planned, but it's real. It's built on truth instead of performance." I understood what she meant. Brandon had tried to use me to create an illusion of the reformed family man. Instead, his manipulation had inadvertently created something genuine, a support system for Emma built on honesty and care rather than deception and control. When Emma started calling David Dad to distinguish him from Daddy Brandon, Michelle worried it might confuse her. "Kids are smarter than we think," I told her. "She knows the difference between someone who chose to love her and someone who's obligated to love her." Brandon, for his part, seemed genuinely bewildered by the arrangement. During one pickup, he asked Emma who I was. "That's Lauren," she said matter-of-factly. "She's Mommy's friend who helps me with art projects and makes the best mac and cheese." "I see," Brandon said, his jaw tight. He looked at me with something between confusion and resentment. "Nice to see you again, Lauren." "Brandon." I kept my voice neutral. Emma was watching, and she didn't need to witness adult drama. Later, Michelle told me he'd asked her if she thought it was appropriate for me to be around Emma. I told him that Emma's life is full of people who choose to love and support her, Michelle said. "And that's exactly how I want it to be." 6 months ago, I'd been devastated by the revelation that my relationship was built on lies. I'd felt used, manipulated, discarded. But sitting in Michelle's kitchen on a Tuesday evening, helping Emma with a school project about families, while David graded papers at the table and Michelle made dinner, I realized something profound had happened. Brandon's manipulation had backfired spectacularly. Instead of creating the illusion of a perfect family, his deception had helped create something real. A chosen family built on truth, support, and genuine care. I wasn't the woman Brandon had tried to use as a prop in his custody performance. I wasn't even the heartbroken victim I'd been 6 months ago. I was Lauren, Emma's honorary aunt, Michelle's friend, part of a family constellation that defied conventional definition, but worked because it was built on honesty instead of lies. And for the first time in years, that felt like exactly who I was meant to be.